Okay, so we're now recording. Welcome everyone to the March AI in Education General Meeting. I'm Emily Rush, and Daniel Stanford and I will be moderating today's session. Just some logistics. As you're joining us, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat. And as of course many of you know, today's session will include a panel discussion on AI literacy, which will be recorded. And I'll also share in an anonymized chat summary following the meeting. Before we really get going, I do want to thank all of those of you who submitted questions for our panelists in advance, and I've incorporated some of them into the discussion questions that we'll get to shortly. But there will be also time for Q&A. And one last thing before we get started, I wanted to ask if you can verify that your volume is on mute when you're not speaking so we can hear the panelists clearly. All right, so before we really delve in, I'm not sure if Trish is here, but Daniel or Trish, do you have any items that you wanted to bring up before we jump into our discussion of AI literacy?
I don't think so. I think I'm just here to enjoy being an audience member this time around. So
Okay.
I think we're good. I'll stick around. I can stay for a little bit at the end if anybody has general questions about the AI group or something like that. So, and I'll keep an eye on the chat too, just in case we have anything that really seems like it needs to be called out.
Okay, great. Yeah, and please feel free to interject or to draw our attention to something in the chat in case we missed that.
Yep. And as we talked about, I'm going to I'm beginning the pinning process for pinning our friends.
Okay,
That sounds like
and
it should hurt.
while Daniel is pinning us, our participants, our panelists, I wanted to start with a brief poll just to see where everyone is at. So I've launched a poll, and basically this is just to know, does your institution or organization have an AI program or guidelines in place? And we'll just take a few minutes to give people a chance to respond to that. Take about 10 more seconds or so to give people a chance to respond. And if you have something, I know the poll is very limited, so feel free to add anything to the chat that is relevant to the poll that you'd like to share with the group. All right, I'll end the poll and share the results. So this is fascinating, and it makes me excited that it seems like this is a very timely discussion today, that the majority of our participants here today don't have an AI literacy program or any guidelines in place. It's exciting to see that some people are taking that on individually, which certainly can be challenging. All right, so thanks so much everyone for participating in the poll. Let me close that. And I think we're ready to dive into our panel discussion. So our plan is to, I'm just checking the time, to spend about 30 or 35 minutes with our panel discussion, and then open up the panel to broader Q&A from the audience members. But at any time, feel free to throw something in the chat as it occurs to you. All right, so let me go ahead and introduce our speakers. All right, so I'm really excited today to introduce our distinguished panelists who have been at the forefront of exploring the role of AI in education and driving meaningful conversations about its impact on teaching and learning. Sometimes, from what our panelists shared before, we all joined participating in multiple talks or public presentations in a single day. So they're really driving conversations in an exciting way. Our first panelist is Maha Bali. Maha is a professor of practice at the American University in Cairo, where she teaches digital literacies, AI literacy, and intercultural learning. She's also a co-founder of Equity Unbound, an open curriculum designed to support equity-oriented intercultural learning for educators worldwide. We're also joined today by Laura Dumin, who is a professor of English and technical writing at the University of Central Oklahoma. Additionally, Laura serves as the AI coordinator for her campus, as well as the co-managing editor of the Journal of Transformative Learning. Last but certainly not least, Lance Eaton is the Director of Faculty Development and Innovation at College Unbound, and Lance is also a part-time director at North Shore Community College and a doctoral student at UMass Boston. And unfortunately, Stella Lee is unable to join us today, but please join me in welcoming our panelists. All right, so I think what we described is the panelists will just sort of negotiate amongst themselves, I guess, who will start off the conversation. So the first question I wanted to ask, and these are questions drawn from what participants submitted in advance. So the first question is, could each of you share what AI literacy means to you and what foundational knowledge what foundational knowledge or kind of a framework this AI literacy might entail?
I can start. I have a couple of different spaces that I inhabit. So I work with first year composition students. I also work with upper division and graduate student technical writers, and I'm working with some graduate students in biological sciences and forensic science this semester. I also work with teaching faculty. So for me, AI literacy may look a little bit different depending on which group I'm working with. With my first year students, it means that we're doing the critical thinking, we're interrogating the output, we're looking at things like that wonderful pie chart set that Daniel posted on LinkedIn last week that was so bad. I loved it. And we're looking and saying, hey, should we have racially diverse Nazis? Should we ignore the fact that this bit of information seems to be factually problematic? Should we look at these sources and just assume that they're all real? So, basic critical thinking skills with my first year students. With my upper division and graduate students, it's looking at what they're actually going to be doing in their jobs. So with my forensic science and biology students right now, we're using things like connected papers and typeset.io and Perplexity to play around with the information, and then going out and double checking the sources and checking to make sure that the synopses are actually right and real. And then with my faculty, I'm making sure that they understand to an extent what AI can and can't do, and maybe some of the things that are good practices for us to do. So things like not putting our students' work directly into an AI and asking the AI if it wrote them, things like that. So the critical literacy for me, it spans a number of different places depending on who I'm talking to.
That's a really good point about how different audiences need a different dimension of what these things are and what it means and what they need urgently, right? My way of thinking about AI literacy, and I always say critical AI literacy, because the critical aspect is very important to me. So it's not just about understanding how AI works and knowing how to use it well, but it's also taking a critical stance and thinking about social justice issues and in what ways we need to be cautious and we need to question if this is actually the right thing to do, and all the issues with the practices in the process of creating AI, and then all the issues in the outputs of AI, the bias, the hallucination. And then for me, the most important thing is appropriate use. And that's where it's very nuanced, like what's appropriate use for a freshman student learning language versus a senior student learning biology versus someone in the job market versus a native speaker and a non-native speaker. And also the use itself. This is something John Ippolito says really well. Hi, John. Which is sort of, is it an opportunity to brainstorm and be creative, or is it something precise that we want? And knowing that actually this is something precise or needs a lot of care, and we shouldn't even go near AI. Just knowing not to use AI is part of the literacy, right? But the bias piece is one that I still can't believe people can use AI for months and months and months and not talk about with their students, or even they just, oh yeah, go and use it, and they're so excited about it. And they don't talk about the bias, and then talk about AI as the tutor and not talk about the possibility of hallucination. If the possibility is 1%, this is more dangerous than when the possibility is 50%, because you're more likely to miss it. So I put in the piece again. I know I sent it on the mailing list, so you've probably all seen it anyway, but I'll stop here and give Lance a chance. Lance a chance, it rhymes.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here. I feel like I don't have a lot of substance to add after both of you and the thoughtfulness. The like one area, I guess the one area I'm is like my daily existential crisis or like thinking around it is the like the that critical AI literacy around like in its ubiquity, both currently and kind of showing up everywhere. Like how do we figure out where like how do we how or in what ways can we challenge the like hyper productivity tool that this is? Because it's I just keep thinking about like we have all seen both within higher ed and beyond the burnout. And some of that burnout is because there's so much more cognitive work that we have to do and none of the means to do it. And this just feels like a tool that is going to, as I often say, it's like instead of that report being done every 3 months, it's now due every week. And like, yes, it can help us, but it's still gonna wear on us. And so I think for me, it's always trying to like there's something within this of not just about the uses of it in learning, but really kind of be identifying like when are we starting to use it in a way that is going to put even more on us, even though it's being sold as a tool to take stuff off of us in some places.
All right. So my next question, it sort of builds upon some of the elements that Lance as well as Laura Maha touched upon, and that's thinking about what are some of the advantages and challenges associated with AI use and AI literacy. And the second part, I warned the speakers, I love two-part questions, is what are some of the strategies that we can employ to maximize AI benefits or benefits of AI literacy programming while addressing the difficulties?
I
I,
think that I will say that possibly boring our students with AI is a really good strategy. Because we talk about it almost every single class period. There are guidelines in all of my assignment sheets. I show them how they can use it. I show them how I've used it. And really, I think by the end of our 15 weeks together, my students are just like, "Oh, do we have to use AI again? Yes, we know." But I think that overwhelming them by constantly talking about it is actually a really good way to inoculate them from some of the maybe poor habits that people might have in using it.
this has definitely happened with me. Like, oh, yes, we don't want to hear about AI anymore. But also, I also do a lot of modeling and experimentation of it in class so that they see when it does something that is wrong. Because I think a lot of times when they use AI on their own, they're not thinking very critically about what's happening with it. But when we do it together, and the prompt is, let's find out what's wrong with, let's go as far as we can to get it to do something that we don't want it to do. Then they get to see it in action, and then they start to get skeptical of it, and it's good. And then when I ask them to do something with, they're like, "Why? We don't want to use it." Um, I actually forgot what Emily's first question was, and as soon as she said it, as soon as she said, "Now the second part of the question is coming," I forgot what the first question was, and I have the captions on, but I can't show the whole script. Um, but so I'll give to Lance, and then I'll see if I want to add anything else later.
That idea, I think I've really, in working with students in the classroom, the thing I've really loved is having them do a chat log and share and um, give them different challenges around using it. So like one is like probing it on something they know deeply, and another is like asking it the same question 10 different times. Like same question, but similar to kind of, so like I've really enjoyed those types of activities and working with the students around it. Um, and the use cases that come up as a result of that and what the students bring in. So that transparency of like I'm sharing how I'm using it or the things that I'm doing with it, that then also allows them to feel like, oh, then let's talk about this and let's see what this looks like. And then similarly in working with faculty, really letting faculty like that transparency of I used, the part or, chunks of this were used around, with generative AI. And so that's what you're seeing here. It opens up the conversations. And I think that's the thing is for me being able to normalize that people are using it and then that allowing for the conversations. Yeah. And I forgot the other parts of the question too.
So I just remembered something that I think relates to that question. I think one of the challenges of trying to teach critical AI literacy, whether to instructors or to students, is that the landscape's changing all the time. Like, I think that, one day it was Bard and then it was Gemini. One day ChatGPT couldn't do this thing and then suddenly it can. One day there are like 100 tools, then there are a million. And so it's hard for us who are supposedly the experts in, I'm an educational developer as well as this course that I teach. And then I have to stay on top of everything. And my boss was saying the other day that some of our staff were saying, so she and I are faculty and the rest of our department are all staff. And one of them was telling her, I'm burnt out, I don't want to do any more AI. And I thought if I decided that I didn't want to do any more AI, I could only do that for like 3 or 4 days because something will change every week. And so that's a huge challenge for us. And I was thinking educational developers are getting burnt out, and we're worried about burning out our faculty, but we're not talking about our own burnout. Like we can't blink.
I
And yeah,
feel
go ahead,
that
Laura.
so deeply. Just, the fact that I've got 5 presentations this week and next week combined, and, just what that looks like. One of the things that I also wanted to share was that I just got done with rough drafts. I've got an IRB approved study that I'm running with it's actually my Comp 1 students right now. They're doing rhetorical analysis on AI output, and I will be presenting that at Central Florida in July. So I'm very excited. But it's been so cool to watch them as they're starting to really delve, dare I say it, into what the AI output looks like, how it tends to form. And then I'm asking them questions like, does this sound like your voice? Do you see yourself in this output? And so many of them are saying, no, not unless I feed my own work into it. Does it give me back my voice? On their drafts, I have them mark all of their AI written content in red color so that we can see it. And what I'm finding is that a lot of students struggle with their conclusion. And so they'll just have AI write it. And I'll say, can you see the difference in the voice here? All of the rest of your paper is so personal and it's so interesting. And then we get to this last paragraph and it's just dry. And they say yes. And so they're actually learning to see that they might get ideas so then they can rewrite that conclusion off of what AI wrote, but they're learning to value their own voices. And I think of how important that is for first year composition students.
So what you just said, Laura, is something all of our writing instructors are saying. And one of the issues I'm in Cairo, so the majority of our students are non-native speakers. Some of them are very fluent in English because they've been learning in English their entire lives, and they pretty much do have a writing voice. And some of them don't even know what we're talking about when we talk about writing voice, and they think the AI sounds so much more impressive. I think that's always an issue with non-native speakers, is that they think they don't know how to speak English really well, or they don't know how to express themselves really well. So they think the AI sounds better, and they don't have that nuance because it's not their native language and they're not very fluent in it. They don't have that nuance of feeling like I might actually sound better with my grammatical mistakes. And oh my God, I love seeing grammatical mistakes right now in student writing. I love it. I miss it. The imposter syndrome. Thank you, Rebecca. Yes, exactly. And that could be just non-traditional students in your context, maybe. And so that part is important, I think, to keep in mind, is that students have to appreciate learning, student voice, or people in general need to appreciate writing voice in order for that to matter. And it's there, it's just they don't understand what it is or realize what it is. The other thing that I think is a challenge with developing critical AI literacy for students or educators is that there's such a discrepancy in where people are on this. So for some people, now it's just like January last year and you're starting over. And then some people are way ahead of me right now and trying to, I think, I was seeing Mark talking in the chat about developing an OER about this, and I think the OER has to be so many different pathways. Are you totally new to this? You have no idea what this is? Are you way ahead and you just want to do more? And you need to have all these different pathways, both for learners like students and educators, and you need to keep updating all the time. So
Yeah, I'm finding in the editing community, because I also am part of an editing community. That's my favorite part of technical writing, is that we've got authors out there who are just, people in the public, and they say, "Oh, I don't need an editor anymore because I can just have ChatGPT do it for me." Or I ran it through Grammarly, which is almost worse than I had my mom read it. But you talk about especially non-native speakers or developmental writers with that imposter syndrome who do think that Grammarly is going to say things better. But what I keep pointing out to my students is that there are a lot of times when I'm using just the spell check and grammar check and Word, and I feel like saying to it, "You're drunk, Word, go home." And the same thing with Grammarly, because it just wants to standardize my word choices and it doesn't like the word choices. It's not that my word choices are wrong. It's not that there's anything problematic with them. It just wants to narrow them down to these three main words every single time. And so I keep trying to talk to my students about what that looks like and how boring that is also when we're talking about AI literacy, not to just trust the machine, but to trust ourselves first.
I'll add to that because I think this is for me a real challenge I see from this like from students, and I work entirely with part-time faculty, so the desire for that AI literacy and in particular critical AI literacy um, is overwhelmed by and again, clearly this is a thing I will keep saying, like the ways that, all the things that are expected of them. And the different demands that are put on folks. So in the from the teaching perspective of it's not just AI, but it's like the LMS, and it's this tool, and it's that tool, and it's that tool, and it's also doing all the things that are super important for caring for students. Um, and also, again, if you're a part-time instructor, like all the additional hours of all that additional work. And same for our students of, you know, we, I have no doubt everybody here comes from these lenses of we want trauma-informed teaching and learning and healing-centered teaching and learning, and we want our students to be seen and felt and feel comfortable to take risks. And at the end of the day, all of our classes have end dates, and if they fail, there is a tangible impact on their lives. And so there's something, to me, it's that there's that cultural piece of it is beneficial to not, for I can see it with students and faculty, like it is beneficial to not think about that because it's already too hard to try to do the things that are being asked. And I think that's for me, a real challenge and nuance in here of not owning we continue to ask impossible things. And so if this feels like if AI feels like it even gives a little bit of relief, it's a false relief, I would say, but it does feel that way for some of the folks that I've seen and talked with.
And for some reason, as you were talking, Lance, my mind went to AI detectors. And I think educators, on the other hand, are trying to find a shortcut to figuring out if students are using AI in unauthorized ways. And well, part of developing educators' critical AI literacy is once you know that AI hallucinates, and I tell you that the AI detector uses AI, then you know it hallucinates, then you try to explain that argument. I think it helps. It doesn't tend to help because, again, they're just so exhausted and they don't want to put in the time. It's not that they don't want to. I don't think they have the time is the issue, right?
It's the time, and I've had those faculty too who have yeah, I put it in and it's or I know, and that then requires a nuanced conversation, right? In order to do that well, and we can't really do that well via email, or at least I don't see people doing it really well via email. So it's so now there's this if if you want to, and yes, we should engage with that student using curiosity and not accusation about their work. That become for many folks that becomes just a now it's you've got to coordinate and organize the actual meeting. You have to step into that meeting in the right space, hopefully not Zoom jumping from meeting to meeting to meeting and then there's follow up and follow through, and those are all important things. And also I mean, if you've got 5 students that might be in that space, that could easily now eat up 5 to 10 hours that week. And that's real.
Well, and this is so you want to be the most hated person in the room, walk in and say, "Hey, everything that we've been doing for the last 50 years, we have to change." All right, thank you, bye. Right? But this is the thing. Like, I don't use AI detectors. I tell my students I'm not going to use them. I am out there. I say I'm doing the Lord's work, telling people not to use AI detectors against their students, because what that does is that sets us up in that policing situation, right? And this is one of those fundamental moments in time where I think we have to shift what we've been doing. Did it work before? That's questionable, but for sure it's not going to work now. We have a wide range of students with a wide range of understanding of AI usage, and I think it becomes so important for each of us to spend at least a little bit of time to teach our students what ethical, transparent, and responsible AI usage looks like in our classes. And then for those of us who have the bandwidth to be doing it, to be running those workshops, to be running the trainings, to be out there giving the talks, to show instructors a different pathway forward. I have not had any obvious cheating in a year and a half now because of AI, and people look at me in amazement. But the reality is that I've shifted my classes over the years, and I was just in a really great place when AI came along. So I'm already all about transformative learning. I'm all about having those conversational spaces, and I'm in a really, I think, privileged position because in my comp classes and in my tech writing classes, I get to kind of decide the direction that we're going. So in my comp classes, they just have to write 20 pages of something or other over the semester. I don't have to give them necessarily content that they walk away with. So we can play with it in a lot of different spaces. And I also build a space of trust with my students so that they trust me and I trust them. And, I come in, and if they've done something really awesome, I come in and I praise them and I tell them, just like with kids, when they've done something good and we want them to do more of it, you praise them, right? And so I think it is a fundamental shift moment. And I think, for adjuncts, for people who are teaching 5-5 loads, like, it is a heavy moment too. But I also think it's a worthwhile moment because when you get to the space where you're keeping up and you're seeing new ways to do it and you're not behind and you're not feeling like everybody's cheating, there is some breathing room in that space of having made the shift.
I was seeing something in the chat about faculty having imposter syndrome and wanting the detectors as sort of the evidence next to their intuition. And I always tell them, I actually trust your intuition much more than I trust the detector. So if your intuition is telling you that a student used AI, you know the student much more than the detector does. I trust you to do that. But the issue is, why are we want to catch students after they've done something that we don't want them to do? We should be working before that. And the thing is, you want to help them not do that again. And for the most part, they're not going to get a good grade for using AI. If they keep getting not good grades for using AI in inappropriate ways, I think they're eventually going to stop. I'm thinking, because they think they're going to get an A or a B, but they're going to get a C or a D or whatever, even if we don't even prove that they've used AI or whatever. So, but this is one of the things, the imposter syndrome aspect, and thinking that this is going to be better than what they have to offer. But the other question, I think the point that Claire is making is we need to have some sort of institutional support for these shifts, right? And I think people who don't want to learn about AI, and I really understand that not everyone has time. It's not like the pandemic where you couldn't not teach online, you had to. If your institution was doing it, you had to do it. But with AI, some people are just trying to not look at it or think about it. But if they're not doing that, students are still being exposed to it, whether or not they want to make the time to change a thing or two about their pedagogy. And I also think that to have the imagination is all you actually only really need imagination. I don't think some of it is a lot of work. Like if you can convert your class to like community-based learning and you've never done that before, that's a huge shift. But it's just sort of about trying to figure out what is it that's very nuanced about what we're teaching and what do we not have to teach anymore if that can be done that way.
All right. I'd like to follow up with I love this wonderful organic conversation. So one of the questions I was wondering about, and this has also appeared on the listserv this week, is how would you respond to claims that AI literacy has different meanings or relevance across disciplines?
Yeah, Of course, right? You know, I think so my 11-year-old is in a coding class after school, and his teacher's 17. And there are some days when his teacher can answer the questions that the kids have, and there are some days when he can't. And so my son will pull up Copilot, and the other kid next to him will pull up ChatGPT, and they'll be sticking their code in back and forth, and then they'll like pull the code over from the AI and they'll see if it works. And that literacy is very different from the literacy that my comp students need. It's also different from the literacy that my technical writing students need in understanding these programs. So, yeah, I do think that it does differ depending on your task and your audience.
Uh, I'll add, I mean, I don't want to, I'll add to that. Um, I think that, that's been I think for a lot of institutions, the challenge at the institutional level of policy is that realistically there needs some higher level of like these are the absolute no-goes. And I think there's some that we can definitely come up with, but that really do need in the different areas. And this is both the departments, the disciplinary departments, but the departments of all the institutions to within with all the departments within an institution really need to figure out what that means. And I think about this at a place where I am, where, we have within our strategic mission a variety of like different types of community oriented and anti-racist practices. And so that actually does have implications for how we think about AI literacy and the uses of AI when we're talking about the marketing department who actually like goes and like creates promotional materials. And I think that's something we have to think about throughout the institution is like triangulating that literacy with the mission and with like where are the boundaries for that particular discipline. I think there's a lot of nuance there for those areas to carve out what that should look like, both policy and the literacy that associates with it.
I think we sort of also alluded to this difference in what critical AI literacy will mean to different audiences. I think if we frame critical AI literacy in questions rather than answers, then we can just keep asking, what is our goal? And then keep asking those questions, and the answers will differ by discipline, but you just have to ask the questions. And I think that's a really important thing. There are elements of it that are the same everywhere, like questioning how it's created and the harm to the environment and the harm to human labor exploitation and their mental health challenges, and the harm in terms of copyright and human beings' own work not being credited. Even forget about the copyright. Like you don't even know where this idea came from anymore, and how important those things I think are general. Generally how AI works, as in how machine learning works, that's the same as it was 20 years ago when I was an undergrad. It's actually not that different. So just understanding that general concept without getting into the technical details is the same, but then how it's being applied in your own practice, given who you are and where you are in the world, is the key thing, I think, is just asking the questions and letting people figure it out. Someone was asking in the chat, like, can we give people readings and not do demos about critical AI literacy? And I've seen that demos are much more powerful. I have also seen that demos, and we talked about this in the mailing list, like visual AI demonstrates things so quickly because you see the image in 1 second and you understand that there's something wrong, versus writing where you have to wade through a lot more to figure it out. And I have 4 visually impaired students in my class this semester, so I don't know how well I'll be able to do that while they can't actually see it. So it'll have to be a bit trickier this time around. But
All right, I'd like to ask one more question and then we'll open it up to audience questions. And so this is actually for you to reflect on an issue or question. And so basically, what is a critical issue or gap in AI literacy that you think people should be talking about more, and why?
I think maybe that not enough instructors actually understand what the AI can and can't do because they haven't played with it, they haven't had trainings on it, they haven't done any reading on it. They've just stepped into the I'm going to ban it space. And if the instructors don't understand what it can and can't do, or the administrators, as the tenure and promotion conversation in the chat is going, don't understand what it can and can't do, then it's really hard for anybody under them, around them, in their classes to be able to experience what AI can and can't do. And so I think if you're not playing with it, then that's going to impede your ability to even understand any of the conversations and understand what your students might do that benefits them and what it might do that harms them.
I don't know if it's the literacy itself and more um, who should be having the conversation. And that like it continues to baffle me. No, I guess it doesn't. It's higher ed. That, you know, faculty developers, instructional designers, like we have been the ones having this conversation. And I mean, almost everybody I know has been like, not everybody, but it's either faculty or faculty developers, instructional designers, et cetera, that are doing, yes, librarians and technologists, absolutely, um, that are doing this work and having this conversation. And I still end up having conversations with like the higher senior leadership of institutions that it is still crickets. And like to me, I guess that's like where the conversation is happening. Like it absolutely needs to happen here, and yet there's still folks in leadership that don't have heads around this or thoughts around this and don't understand the importance of it. And I think that's what worries me the most, because um, how then do we get the additional support that we all need to support all of this, right? We talk about that burnout. So to me, it's like, where is that conversation happening and where isn't it? That's yeah, that continues to worry me.
I I think there's, first of all, like sort of the balance is missing in general. Like you find people who are very, very pro, let's use AI, and people who are just like very, very against, let's not use AI. And the people in the middle are very few. And being in the middle is not about just being balanced. It's because you're seeing the issues and you're also seeing the potential. And I think students deserve for us to be able to see both and deserve for us to teach them both. I think the one that I think people aren't talking about the ethical issues enough. They even people like mention them in passing and then they keep going on. And what I really appreciate is sometimes when I talk about one of the issues and people say, so what do you do now that you know that AI is doing this much harm to the environment? Do you stop using it? Do you know they've been exploiting labor this much? Do you stop using it? And then with things like the biased output and the hallucinations, those two, like that should stop us a lot. And like the people who are so excited about what it can do, whether in the workplace or anywhere, where's the conversation around that reproduction of inequality and epistemic injustice? There isn't enough about this. I very rarely see people who are using AI a lot recognizing or acknowledging these things, as if there's too little of it or it's not relevant to them. And maybe it's not, maybe it's more relevant to me because of my location in the world. I don't know. It just, I think again there was a conversation about language in the mailing list. I can't remember if it was this one or another one. I'm like, oh, you're talking about English, aren't you? That's not the same for all languages. It's horrible. It looks like it knows Arabic, but it's not really good at it. So there are these things that I think just get they're marginal to the conversation, and I think they should be more central.
You know, Maha, we've almost finished, sorry, using Sydney Dobrin's AI and writing book in my comp class. And one of the chapters looks at resource use and who has access to resources. And so I was talking to my students about what that looks like if, you know, throughout much of the United States, we've got rural areas that don't have high-speed internet. And so students might be going to the local McDonald's or the local hotel parking lot to do their homework if they even have a computer. They might be on a phone trying to write their essays that way. And so there's this huge divide about who has access even to this AI. And if all you have is your device that the school has checked out to you and it's got bans on it from being able to access any of the AI programs, how are you supposed to learn ethical and responsible use of AI? I mean, you're going to go out and you're going to look at TikTok and you're going to see what's on Reddit. And when you finally get your own device, you're going to have learned all of the bad things that are out there making waves and not have the chance to really learn how to use them well. And we also see that students who are likely to get picked up by AI detectors are the ones who aren't tech savvy. They're ones who are already historically marginalized. So I think there's a real concern for me about what's happening in that social and economic divide. I mean, I do see some really great spaces where people who might not have gotten job interviews before can finally have AI help them with their resumes and their cover letters. And so that could be a huge equalizer. But I think we're also going to be hit by waves of students with massively different levels of AI understanding.
But have you seen someone badly use AI to write a cover letter and how bad that looks?
I have seen some of those, yes.
So it's not helping everyone.
Well, and I think that's where the AI literacy comes in too, which is why I'm really interested in what my students find with their rhetorical analysis, is because if we don't understand the weirdness that AI outputs, so, if we're just like Joe person out there on the street who doesn't have a college degree and is trying to have AI write their cover letter for them, that may look very different from Ivy League graduate who is having AI assist them in their writing.
For sure, but you realize what you just did there, right? You just said that the more privileged person will be able to use AI better to save themselves time, and the less privileged person.
100%. Yes. And we're seeing that too from the studies that are coming out, that the students who are higher performing are the ones who understand how to use AI, which is another reason why I feel an ethical and moral responsibility to teach my students good AI use, because I want them to have a leg up in college and then be able to get jobs and demonstrate their usefulness, which unfortunately that's capitalism, right? But to be able to demonstrate that they still have use in the workplace, even with AI, and maybe especially because of AI.
I do think that there's an underlying thing in all of these conversations about AI replacing people. We're talking about generative AI and we're usually talking about text-based. And it makes it look like, and that might be a Western world thing, like if you're not from an oral culture, life is not writing. There's actual life out there that we're writing about. And I think I always, when people say they're using AI to write emails or whatever, I'm like, I'm hoping that your email that you wrote with AI didn't promise your boss that you're going to do something that you're actually not going to do. There's actual work that's going to happen. There's actual, when we do research, there's actual people that you may be interviewing or an experiment that you may be doing in the lab. And of course, some of that could be done with AI or could pretend to be done by AI. I guess you could send a bot to interview someone, but it won't be as nuanced as you building rapport with a person and asking them more deeper questions or something like that. You know what I mean? So I think there's a little bit of this hype around it that is really not, oh, a nice cat. Hello, cat. And you can't do AI. You can't do that with AI. But so I think there's an over hyping of what it can do. And the AI that's been used a lot in the world, like in medicine and things like that, is actually very specialized and it does one very specific thing really well. But I don't think the generative AI that seems to be generally able to do a lot of things is only able to write about things. It's not able to do the things, if that makes sense. And I think that's important. Like in jobs, maybe there are jobs where the majority of what you do is write, but you're still writing about something that people did, right?
That's
You're
a
not
really
writing about writing.
interesting. Well, that's really interesting because I guess maybe just the way that the US sees things, it's all about production and this capitalist, how much can we get out of you? Squeezing blood from a stone kind of thing. And that's really where your value is as a worker, as much as that stinks. And I would say that's even in academia. I mean, we're seeing people again hitting that publish or perish wall, and they're saying, okay, I've got to get 3 more articles out and I've got 2 years to do it. So I'm going to have AI help me with that. Um, and I do think that that's just going to continue to lead to burnout. And we are seeing not just tech companies, but any job that is a white collar job looking and saying, okay, how can I decrease my people by increasing their AI use? And, that is concerning. But, I talk to my students about that, but I also say, but hey, here's how you show your own value. So I don't know. I see both sides of that.
I submitted an article for peer review, and one of the peer reviewers used AI to give us feedback. And the
Was it any
person who
good?
recognized this was happening was the undergraduate student author. It's like,
Wow.
this is written by AI. It's very clearly written by AI. Once someone tells you, you realize it's very generic feedback, and it's referring to the article as if it's some other thing, like not manuscript, or just something like that. And it's saying that we didn't do things that we did do. And then I told the editor, and the editor's like, "Yep, you're right. Dismiss." Of course, it was reviewer two. It's always
Of
reviewer
course.
two. But this is one of those things where I'm like, this is a volunteer thing. You don't have to peer review articles for journals. This is something you do for free that is on top of your work. If you don't want to do it, just don't do it. But why use AI to not read our article and give it, like, what's the point?
Well, we get points towards promotion and tenure for
I don't get
reviewing
anything.
articles.
I
Okay.
don't get
Yeah,
anything for doing that.
that tends to, maybe that's more a Western thing. But again, we can say, oh, I did this many reviews and that looks good for you. So, if you're able to do 10 reviews in a month, even if they're all junk because AI did them, you can put those on your CV and you can say, look, I get points for this. So again, it's back to that capitalist mindset. We are stuck in it here.
All right, I think this is a good opportunity to open up to questions from the audience. So feel free to put something in the chat, or even better, raise your hand and pose a question to our panelists. And while you're all thinking about questions, Daniel, are there any burning issues from the chat that we want to go back to?
Oh my gosh, there's there's a lot there. Uh, I don't know. The thing, this is sort of in the chat, but the thing that kept coming up for me was just this, how transactional everything is. And it was transactional before AI came along. This is just showing, it's shining a light on how nobody wanted to do this compliance level crap at work and at school, and this busy work and this stuff that has no meaning and purpose. So I don't know if I'm pulling this from the chat or just my own rant, but I feel like the AI shortcuts that everybody's taking, everybody wanted to take the shortcut before because nobody's intrinsically motivated to do busy work. So how can we use that to kind of reboot the system? But if everything is transactional, including how you get promoted and how you get tenure, I don't know how you do that.
I have now reached that
So
privileged space of being a full professor, and transactional doesn't matter to me nearly as much now, which is great. But, I think one of the things that becomes important is when we go back to that idea of playing with the AI. Some people are going to want to take those shortcuts. I like to have the AI write my outlines for me because it's really hard for me, the way that my neurodiversity works, it's really hard for me to focus and to figure out what I want to write on. So that AI actually helps me, but I don't want it writing for me because then it takes me, hours and hours to do the editing. And I talk to my students about that, and I talk to other faculty about that too, where at first maybe it seems like a great idea to take the shortcuts until we realize how much extra time it's adding to our workload. And then we learn what works for us, and then we just back away from the rest of it. But I think that takes hours of play and work to figure out what does and doesn't make sense for us, so it becomes maybe less transactional. I don't know.
The transactional piece is really like it's a challenge within all of this at all levels of the institution. Um, that idea of publish or perish. I think what's interesting is, does anybody know the first actual mention of that, at least in the written record? It comes from, and this will tell you a lot, a book called The Academic Man, published in 1940 or 1942. And the person writing about it was already using it as like, this is already an old chestnut that we throw around, publish or perish. And this intersects a lot with like where my research and dissertation is focused on, which is academic piracy. And if we want to talk about if we want to talk about the transactional nature of where we are in higher ed, um, my study was like I interviewed a bunch of people, a bunch of scholars, everywhere from like independent scholar to folks at Ivy League schools who feel it's necessary to use places like Sci-Hub and LibGen to access research literature so they can produce research that's going to end up being given to publishers so publishers can sell that back to higher ed and end up behind paywalls. And so like this is this is peak academic capitalism where in AI I think feeds into this of like we're in a situation where scholars feel it's necessary to break the law in order to do their research that's going to end up behind a paywall and not help other people. And this crazy cycle that we're at, the AI piece, like it just fits right in. And it's again that like it's hard not to, for me it's hard not, as somebody who has done the full-time adjunct thing, who works at institutions that hire all adjunct, like it is hard not to see people taking these tools and doing the thing where they're using it for reviews and things like that, because it's just been it's permeated the system for generations. And like how do we unpack that?
I mean, the thing that comes to mind as you all describe those kinds of things is maybe that thing that is busy work that AI can do is something that we shouldn't be doing anymore anyway. And I think in teaching, that's what I've been doing in my teaching. So I no longer ask students to just write a generic reflection about anything because that AI will do that. They don't need to understand the reading to give me that. So let's not do that. Let's have a discussion about it in class. And I ask them just pick a quote they like and let's talk about it in class. And or I let them annotate a reading instead of write a reflection on it. That's just like, that seems like more accessible to them. So I'm just thinking about like busy work that we do in university. Yes, yes, do I really, do I need to write this? Will someone read this? And then what I think is hilarious is when the student writes it with AI, then the teacher gives the feedback with AI, and then nobody's reading it, nobody's writing it, then really that there's no reason for that piece of writing to exist in the world. It has no purpose in the world. But if this piece of writing is going to actually affect something real, then it's worth doing. But there's so much in academia that we do that is useless. And we need to.
So when I was going up for full professor, I had a dean pull me aside in the bathroom and tell me that I was not going to get promoted unless I had 2 publications, because I've always pushed back against publications. And they said it's not written in the rules anywhere. It's just that because you're English faculty, we expect publications from you. And I was like, huh, that's really interesting. Thank you for telling me this in the bathroom. But I think, so one of the things that I've always pushed back on, and one of the reasons why if I'm going to post anything, it's on Medium or on my Facebook group or on LinkedIn, is because I want to make the information accessible to as many people as possible. If I've written anything that, when I've changed up my assignment sheets and whatnot, I've put that information into Creative Commons files on my website because I want people to have access to this information. But I also am in a privileged position of not needing to gain money from my writing necessarily, right? And so I think that's one of the things that so when we have privilege, we can step back and we can say, I don't like this rat race. I don't like this hamster wheel. I'm going to step off. But for the people who are at the lower levels still trying to get tenure, or who are adjuncting, or who are just hoping that they're going to get a class next semester, it's really hard to step off that hamster wheel and say, I'm not going to participate anymore, because then your job might say, well, we don't need you anymore.
Daniel, I think there was one more question from the chat. Were you going to interject with that?
Yeah, we were just messaging a bit about this, and I noticed this recurring theme about whether we're obligated to teach students about AI and to teach AI literacy because there's some sort of mysterious employer out there who's already demanding this mystery set of AI skills that no one seems able to define or give specific examples of. I think it's important for students to be aware of it, but I'm curious what the panelists think about this. You have to get on board with it because the students need it so they can get a job, but nobody seems able to really tell us exactly what those job descriptions are and what that skill set looks like.
So my thought is that if we've got general public person out there who is hiring manager at a company who has heard that AI is the thing, then they're going to want people to demonstrate that they have AI skills, even if that hiring manager has no idea what that means. So I do think that we do have to teach it. I think it's important for us to be teaching these skills. And it's not like we're teaching just how to use ChatGPT. We're teaching how to critically interrogate these things. We're teaching how to use different tools well, and then allowing students to figure out what that skill set looks like as they move into the workplace. I don't think AI is going anywhere. And I am seeing it in showing up in some technical writing spaces where they're wanting people to be able to do this, that, or the other with AI. And I think as AI becomes more ingrained into everything, I was just hearing a story this morning that some of the new computers that are coming out have AI built into them too. So it's going to be everywhere. And I think within probably 5 years or so, students are just going to be expecting to know these things. Not necessarily to say we all have to get on board with it 100%. I'm still like an optimistic skeptic, if you will. But I think that we're doing our students a disservice if we're not helping them to understand what AI can and can't do.
Yeah, I think it's that piece we also referred to earlier, where if there are people of more privileged backgrounds being able to say and demonstrate that, demonstrate that like I have these skills, there continues to be that imbalanced field when people are emerging out of college. And as I mentioned in the chat, there is this like it is that like the social media skills of the 2000s and 2010s that like popped up in lots and lots of places of like we need that person to do that thing, even though how many of those really needed that, I think that's a piece of it as well.
So I think there's an attitudinal aspect to all of this and the lifelong learning aspect of I'm willing to learn anything because I was a computer scientist. I started working in the IT department of Procter and Gamble, which should be way below my skill level because it's an IT department. It's not a programming job. But I learn new things all the time, including technical things, in order to do my job well. So I think it's good to be exposed to a lot of things of what's available now, and then a year later there'll be other things. And it's not about how well you knew how to do the thing 2 years ago, but it's just about being exposed to a lot of things and just being able to use it again critically, and then being able to learn something new and figure out if that's the thing that's going to be useful to you or not. I saw a lot of people writing in the chat about um, types of AI that are used for research, for example. And so this is similar to the work that we do. So we know how that's used in the job market, right? And so SciSpace or like typeset.io, I find that one really useful for helping you like summarize an article you're reading. And I think students should use this all the time if the article is above their reading level, because the teachers aren't giving them an article at their reading level. Like, what are they going to do, right? But then there are others like Illicit, where I've heard that the quality of the articles it recommends is not actually very high. So it's recommending articles on the topic, but it's not like, so you need to use these things often enough to be able to get the judgment to know whether it's good in your field. There's something called the research rabbit or something that does well on medical research. And it tends to give you a lot of medical research, but if you're researching something else, it'll also give you medical research, even though that's not your subject area. So when I research care, and it assumes I'm talking about care in the healthcare system. You know what I mean? So I think getting them on the pathway and knowing and letting them be careful and knowing that they will learn something new. And it's about the attitude of I can learn anything new. And I can put in the time to learn something new. That's more important than learning the thing right now. But to be able to get that attitude, you need to always be learning new things, right?
All right, we're reaching the end of our hour, so I just want to give a brief opportunity for our panelists to contribute any concluding remarks if you like.
There's been so much good stuff here. I appreciate the questions. I appreciate getting to actually speak to Lance and Maha face to face. It's been a while since I've gotten to see you all in person, so it's been great.
Right. Well, thank you, Laura, and thank you, Laura, Lance, and Maha, so much for joining us. Thank you all for the attendees and I have not been able to keep up with the chat. It looks amazing. So thank you all so much for joining us today. I will send out a recording as well as an anonymized summary of the chat later this week or early next week. And look out in the next week or so for the invitation for the April meeting. And Daniel, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Just I'm happy to stick around. I have co-host status, so I think Emily, I don't know if you have time to hang out, but if anybody has more casual thoughts, we could stop the recording and just gripe about burnout or careers in or out of AI, or you're do like